George P. Bush, thank you so much. You have been Texas Land Commissioner for about 2 terms now, and now you want to become the Attorney General. Why, and what are your priorities?
Well, thank you for having me, Jack. It's great to be with you. I'm running for Attorney General because Texans deserve better than what they've got. We have a top cop that's facing 99 years maximum criminal sentencing in Harris County for 3 felony counts involving securities fraud. And the FBI announced late last year that they're looking into allegations ranging from bribery to corruption to abuse of office. And so whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think most Texans that we visit with in this campaign say it's time for a change. It's time to hit a reset button and have finally an advocate that's representing law enforcement, confronting the porous border situation, looking at human trafficking, prioritizing that as it's the fastest growing crime in our state, and then most importantly, restoring integrity and trust to one of the most important state agencies you'll find in Austin.
You're talking about, of course, the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, and he has denied all wrongdoing, whether it's on the state fraud charges and even on the accusations by his former top lieutenants as far as federal bribery accusations. And so I'm wondering, as far as that is concerned, are you saying that you believe if he were to become the nominee again, that he would be indicted, opening the way for a Democrat?
Absolutely. Ken Paxton will lose in the general election against a Democrat. That's the bottom line. He was the lowest vote getter 4 years ago, even though he outspent his opponent over 2-1 against an open borders, defund the police Democrat. And so my suspicion is that he needs to sit down for a jury trial. If he proclaims his innocence, then why won't he just sit down for trial? Now that an appellate court has moved the case back to Collin County, his home county, he should be more than willing to sit down in front of a jury of his peers and be evaluated on the 3 felony counts. And by the way, you, the taxpayer, and your viewers out there and listeners know that you are actually funding his defense as it relates to the Texas Whistleblower Act charges being brought against him. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the FBI investigation, but suffice it to say that our top lawyer needs to be above reproach. There shouldn't even be a question of one's character and competence for this important role.
What do you make of this seemingly growing Republican field? Because, as you know, yesterday, Congressman Louis Gohmert of East Texas said that he may jump into this race. And so him announcing that possibility, what do you think that says about not only the incumbent, but about the rest of you who said that you were already going to challenge him?
Well, this is about a building narrative and a building momentum that's occurring in the grassroots of the Republican Party of Texas, desiring to hit the reset button and start all over again and make sure that we put the best, to use a sports analogy, football team on the field, because there's way too much at risk. The work of Republicans over the last several decades is too consequential to allow this to happen. Imagine having a Democrat AG after the redistricting maps running our voting integrity in a state like Texas. It would throw a wrench in all the progress that we've made as Republicans the last several decades here in Texas.
I want to ask you about some of the poll numbers that have come out recently. In a UT Tyler DMN poll in September, Paxton led you 43 to 28%. In the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation earlier this month, it was 50 to 17%. In the UT Texas Tribune poll on November 5th, 48 to 16%. You're far behind. So what do you make of those numbers, and how are you going to change primary voters' minds that you are the right person for the job?
Well, a majority of Texans, not only internal data but external data, show that Texans do not trust their current Attorney General. And we believe that a lot of voters have not been cluing in on this race. For an incumbent to have a majority of their fellow Republicans not support and overwhelmingly say we want this guy back in office, I think sends a stronger signal that Republicans are ready for a change. Look, we've just started this campaign. What I'm really excited about, Jack, is we have 600 volunteers phone banking, block walking. We've knocked on over 50,000 doors throughout Texas. And so we're running a grassroots, old-fashioned retail campaign throughout the state of Texas that's going to focus on securing the border, backing the thin blue line, human trafficking, restoring integrity, but actually doing it and going into the legislature on day one ready to lead rather than going to the Capitol to pick up staffers for mistresses. We need somebody who's focused on the job day in, day out, and that's what I'm going to do.
When I talk to Republicans in the grassroots, they tell me they want someone who's going to fight back against the Biden administration. How do you convince them that you are the fighter? And do you agree with that?
Absolutely. This is very important. For the next 2 years, Republicans AG, but particularly the Texas AG, not only needs to fight, but win. And that's where Ken has fallen behind. We've lost the Obamacare case against California, and Texans don't like losing to California. We're about to lose the abortion case. Our Solicitor General got routed in front of the Supreme Court just earlier this week. And so if you look at the monumental cases that Ken has led, we've lost them all. We're losing the antitrust case against Google, Facebook, and you name it. And so we need a leader that's actually going to win in the courthouse. And I've been successful against the Obama administration on the banks of the Red River. I took on the anti-fracking ordinance in Denton early on in my first tour. And then also under the Biden administration, fighting back against the overreach on private land ownership. And that's why I'm in the courthouse already against the Biden administration to finish the so-called Trump wall. And I'm announcing today out of my office that we will be starting the first 2 miles of the Texas wall that was funded by the Texas legislature this special session.
When is that exactly going to start and where?
So we signed an easement with the Texas Facilities Commission. They are finalizing negotiations with contractors that worked on the Trump wall, and they will begin breaking ground by the end of the year, as the governor announced earlier this week. But we are proud that the first part of the Texas wall, which you, the taxpayer, in addition to $60 million in private donations, will begin on GLO lands.
You mentioned the Texas Heartbeat Act, and the U.S. Supreme Court is really deciding what to do now. You criticized the Solicitor General, and so what I'm wondering is, how would you have defended the law, and would you have? What do you think of the Heartbeat Act, and how concerned are you about the fact that, which some Supreme Court justices mentioned, that if they allow this with the civil lawsuits enforcement, that could be applied to other constitutional rights?
Well, that's absolutely the problem here, is that it's a slippery slope for virtually all other sensitive issues that Texans have decided to enshrine under Texas law. And suddenly that would be open to questioning from the Supreme Court. So the enforceability mechanism of the Texas Heartbeat Law is the part that the Supreme Court, in their questioning just last week, seems to be the area of concern. Now, as Texas AG, I would wholeheartedly support the Mississippi Heartbeat Bill, and that's where I think that will hold up and withstand judicial scrutiny before the Supreme Court. So what I would have done differently is to work on the mechanism by which there's enforceability under the Texas Heartbeat Law. Look, I'm Catholic. I believe that life begins at conception, and I will fight for that. But the way that the law was crafted, as the Supreme Court indicated in their initial hearing with Solicitor General Stone, indicates that Ken used this as an opportunity to score political points rather than defending the work of the Texas legislature.
So does that mean you would have not suggested to lawmakers, the authors of the bill, that they go down that route and enforce it differently when drafting the legislation?
Absolutely. And I think the role of the AG is drafting legal opinions to clarify the law and to interpret the law as it is under either the U.S. Constitution or the state constitution. And that's where Ken has dropped the ball on the mask mandates as it relates to independent school districts here throughout Texas, where the mishmash of regulation and interpretation under the Texas Disaster Act has created, among educators that I talk with every single day and school board members, a morass in the law. And so the role of the AG is to clarify the law to avoid endless lawsuits and create a functional government.
Well, what is the law? What does the law say? I mean, as it relates to mask mandates in schools, because you're right, there has been a lot of confusion.
So the Texas Disaster Act was drafted really contemplating the majority of our natural disasters in Texas, and that's tornadoes and hurricanes, with typically a 7-day break. But yet when counties and cities decided to invoke their public and health safety rights in terms of extending public health and safety measures such as mask mandates, or in some instances vaccination requirements, that there's no sunset provision. So these executive orders, if you will, at the local and county level, including here in Dallas County, can go on in perpetuity without any kind of due process or appeals unless the state intervenes. And so that is where an AG needs to provide that clarity, which the current AG hasn't done.
The Biden administration is suing Texas over the elections integrity law, and Texas is suing the Biden administration over the Biden administration's new rule about requiring a vaccine or very regular testing in the workplace. Where are you on these issues?
So I would support the Texas election integrity bill to its full extent. I think it's just a common sense sunset bill, if you will, of the pre-COVID election systems in Texas. Look, this is the most important constitutional right that we all have, and we never want to have any questions or doubt as to the integrity of our election system. And this really runs down the alleyway, if you will, of what the AG is supposed to focus on, because this is the only area of criminal law that the AG's office in Texas has of original jurisdiction. So I would support that. I'm against ballot harvesting and some of the other manipulations that have been attempted in the Texas system. As it relates to the overreach of the federal government on vaccine mandates, I would be fighting in the courthouse against that. Business owners that I talk with, particularly in healthcare, which is the perverse consequence of this requirement, tell me that they're now going to have to downsize their staff when we have overworked doctors and nurse practitioners and frontline nurses that have been dealing with COVID for now close to 2 years that are going to have to be let go because of this requirement because they choose not to get vaccinated. So instead of having a top-down driven approach, why aren't we working on solutions to encourage, and there's nothing preventing businesses to economically incentivize their employees to get vaccinated. There's other ways to work around this instead of having the federal government require people to get vaccinations.
Do you agree with those who say the state should ban vaccine mandates?
Absolutely. I'm in agreement with the governor's executive order in that respect.
Yes. And let me ask you, what is your message to conservatives, because you have to go through the primary first, who questioned and were really angered by your initial plans to renovate the Alamo? They were upset by it. You got into a whole brouhaha with the lieutenant governor. And so what is your answer to their concerns? Because some of them still are not happy with your original plan.
So the story of the revolutionaries has never been better told than in the last 7 years of my work as land commissioner. As a military vet who brings my children to the shrine of Texas liberty, I couldn't be more proud of the work that we've done to take on the deferred maintenance needs of the church and the Long Barrack. Certainly there was some controversy over the 1836 plan, but we're now moving in a great direction where the South Gate, in addition to the Palisades, and now the so-called Ripley's buildings, are going to be around for our children and our grandchildren to enjoy. And we're telling the story more proudly, more purposefully than ever before. So the Lieutenant Governor and I have kissed and made up. We'll be meeting later this year to announce the groundbreaking of the Phil Collins exhibit on the backside of the church, which will exhibit close to $15 million worth of Alamo-related artifacts that Phil Collins has devoted to the people of Texas. So we're really excited about the future of the Alamo, thanks to the work of my staff at the GLO and the work of the Lieutenant Governor.
My last question to you, Commissioner, is if you are to win and become the Republican nominee in the primary, how does your message change, or does it change, to speak to the general election audience? Because you will have a Democrat, obviously, who you're going to be challenging, if that were the case.
I pride myself on being consistent. I'm not going to change my message. I'm just going to talk about these areas, particularly in criminal law, that are not being filled. I talk to Democrats as much as I talk to Republicans, and I want to be a new kind of leader that represents the next generation of Texas leadership. And they tell me we've got to take on human trafficking. Texas women can't be for sale. That police budgets need to be refunded, not defunded. That we need to attract more people into an honorable career of law enforcement. And Democrats alike are concerned, especially on the border, that are longtime ranching families and farmers, that they want to secure our border. And it's a fairness issue. I'm the son of a legal immigrant. My mother's from Mexico, who went through a 12-year legal process. We need to uphold that and honor that, but we also need to condemn the illegality of people coming here the wrong way, and to confront the policies from this administration with no sense of urgency to encourage more illegal immigration. So it's it really has appealed to independents, to moderates. I'm not going to change my positions. I think this campaign is all about integrity and making sure we have clean and good government in Austin working for you every single day.
I did have one other question that I wanted to ask you, and that is, what do you say to conservatives who are looking at the endorsement by former President Trump to Ken Paxton? And, what do you say to them? Because they may, they still very, very much support the former president, and they look to his guidance on selecting a candidate.
I still reach out to President Trump supporters every single day on the campaign trail, and will continue to do so. And as we've seen with Jake Elsie's win in a special election race in North Texas recently, and with Glenn Youngkin's win in Virginia, there is still a very wide pathway available to consistently conservative, in my case, constitutional conservative Republicans that promote kitchen table issues that I interact with constituents on a daily basis. And so we're going to run an old-fashioned grassroots retail campaign across the state, west of the Capitol, north, east, Dalhart, down into the valley, from El Paso to Orange, Texas. And so we're really excited with the progress, the endorsements we're picking among law enforcement, and also the National Border Patrol Council, which, by the way, advised the president on illegal immigration. So when you look at the president's endorsements that he got in his race in Texas, a lot of them are endorsing me in this race.
George P. Bush, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you.